Okay, so are you ready to think twice before you answer that next text? Because this deep dive is going to take us into the fascinating and maybe slightly unsettling world of the microbes that are living on your phone.
Yeah, it's easy to forget our phones are like in contact with just countless surfaces every day, right? And
Yeah.
they're picking up these microscopic passengers along the way. But this research paper really dives deep into how diverse and potentially dangerous those passengers might be.
Yeah, and we're diving into a 2024 study that looked at phones from the 2023 WNCA Medical Conference in Sydney. So can you set the scene for us a little bit?
So yeah, imagine attendees from all over the world converging on this conference, phones in hand, right? And researchers saw this as a really unique opportunity to study what kind of microbes might be hitching rides across borders.
So they were like, let's swab these phones and see what we can find.
Exactly. And, they didn't just look for any bacteria. They used this technique called metagenomic DNA sequencing, which is basically a way to identify all the different microbes present by looking at their DNA. And what they found was honestly astounding. 2,204 distinct microbial hits across just 20 phones.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Did you say 2,204 different types of microbes on just 20 phones?
You heard that right. It's like each phone was carrying this miniature ecosystem, like a snapshot of all the different microbial worlds we're encountering every day.
Okay, that's already pretty wild. But I understand that one phone in particular really stood out, right?
Absolutely. One phone belonging to an attendee from Australia contained a staggering 11.5% of all the microbes that were identified in the entire study.
One phone, almost 12%. That's a lot. What does that tell us about how our phones gather these microbes?
Yeah, well, it really highlights how our phones act like these incredibly sticky notepads for the microbial world. They're picking up traces of everywhere we go and everything we touch. And remember, this was just one conference. Imagine the diversity on phones that have traveled the world.
Okay, now that it's a little bit unsettling when you think about it, all those unseen hitchhikers. But it's not just about the ick factor, is it? This has real implications for our health, right?
Absolutely. And what's concerning is not just the sheer number of microbes, but the types they found, specifically the presence of ESKAPE and HACEK bacteria.
Okay, those names don't exactly sound friendly.
Huh.
What's the big deal about those particular types of bacteria?
So these bacteria are notorious for causing really difficult to treat infections, particularly in healthcare settings. So the fact that they were found on phones and, especially those belonging to healthcare workers, it raises some serious concerns about potential transmission routes.
So someone could pick up one of these superbugs just by touching their phone.
It's certainly possible, and that's why this research is so important. It really highlights this kind of hidden pathway for the spread of potentially dangerous pathogens, and it's one that we often overlook.
And it gets even more concerning when we start to consider antibiotic resistance, which seems to be everywhere these days.
Yeah, you're right. And this study actually found evidence of that too. They discovered genes for antibiotic resistance, these pesky ARGs we keep hearing about, and they were right there on these phones. In fact, based on their data, it's estimated that millions of these resistance genes could be entering Australia every single year just through mobile phones.
Millions just through phones. That is a staggering thought.
It is, and it really underlines a crucial point. This isn't just some theoretical risk. We're talking about real-world implications for global health, particularly as antimicrobial resistance continues to rise. It's making treating infections so much harder, which can lead to longer illnesses and even death.
Okay, so we've got these potential superbugs in our pockets hitching free rides across continents, but wait, there's more. It's not just human health we have to worry about. This research uncovered a biosecurity threat I never would have imagined.
Hey.
Speaking of risks, this research also uncovered something that I found pretty unsettling. They found plant pathogens on these phones.
Yeah, that's right. Things like Pantoa stewardtii and Xanthomonas campestris, which can cause some pretty serious damage to crops.
Wait, so you're saying our phones could be carrying diseases that could actually harm plants? How is that even possible? It's not like we're all out there rubbing our phones on crops or anything.
Well, it does seem a little strange, right?
Yeah.
But think about it this way. These microbes could come from anywhere, right? Contaminated soil, an infected plant, even just someone handling produce at the grocery store. And our phones touch so many surfaces, they're bound to pick up these tiny hitchhikers along the way.
And then those phones travel, potentially carrying those plant pathogens to new places. It's almost like our phones are bypassing all these biosecurity measures without us even realizing it.
Exactly. And that's why this finding is so significant. It really highlights how interconnected our world is and how easily we can unintentionally transport potentially harmful organisms.
Yeah, the study actually mentioned that this could be especially concerning for a country like Australia, which has such unique and delicate ecosystems.
Absolutely. Australia has this remarkable diversity of plants and animals, many of which are found nowhere else in the world. So introducing new pathogens could have really devastating consequences for that delicate balance.
So not only could these phone-traveling microbes harm human health, but they could also threaten entire ecosystems. That's a pretty scary thought. It's making me think twice about where I set my phone down.
Yeah, it's definitely a good reminder that our actions have these far-reaching consequences, even in ways that we might not always realize. But speaking of consequences, let's maybe talk about how these findings relate to our daily lives, because we've talked about phones as vectors for spreading these microbes, but how does this actually play out on a personal level?
Right, because it's easy to get caught up in these global implications and forget that this is happening on our phones right here, right now.
Exactly. And that's where I think this concept of the third hand is really helpful. Think about how often you touch your phone throughout the day. You touch it after using the bathroom on public transportation at the grocery store.
Pretty much constantly. I mean, I'm touching my phone right now.
Exactly. And then you touch your face, your food, you shake hands with someone, and the cycle continues. So your phone essentially acts as this third hand picking up and spreading these microbes everywhere it goes.
And we already know that phones can carry this incredibly diverse array of microbes, including those antibiotic-resistant genes. So doesn't that diversity actually create an environment that's like ripe for horizontal gene transfer?
You're exactly right. And that's where things get really interesting and also a bit concerning. Horizontal gene transfer is essentially bacterial trading. It's like they're swapping genes like trading cards, and it allows them to share genetic information, including those pesky antibiotic resistance genes.
So you're saying that just the close proximity of all these different microbes on a phone surface could actually be contributing to the spread of superbugs?
It's a real possibility. The more diverse the microbes are in a given environment, the more opportunities there are for this gene swapping to occur. And our phones, with their constant contact with all these different surfaces and environments, could be playing a significant role in facilitating this whole process.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot to process. So our phones aren't just carrying these microbes, they're potentially helping them evolve into even bigger threats. It's all a bit overwhelming, to be honest.
It's definitely a lot to take in, but the good news is that understanding these risks is actually the first step towards mitigating them.
So where do we go from here? I mean, am I really supposed to trade in my smartphone for a carrier pigeon?
Well, I don't know about that, but you're right to be thinking about solutions. And the authors of the study actually highlighted the importance of something really simple: phone sanitation.
Okay, so like washing our hands, but for our phones.
Exactly. We sanitize our hands after using the restroom before we eat, but we rarely think about our phones, which we're touching just as often, if not more. Especially at points of entry like airports, where you've got microbes from all over the world mingling. Imagine if those hand sanitizing stations we see everywhere also had a spot for our phones.
Right. It seems so obvious when you think about it. And maybe it wouldn't be such a bad idea to just like give our phones a quick clean throughout the day too.
It certainly couldn't hurt. And this could even be an opportunity to rethink how we design phones in the first place, you know? Maybe we need materials that are less hospitable to microbes or that make sanitation easier.
Now that you mention it, I've seen those UV sanitizing devices for phones. Could those be a viable option?
They certainly could. This research really highlights this crucial intersection of technology and health and security. It's a good reminder that our devices are really extensions of ourselves in a way, and we need to treat them accordingly.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder if we could also leverage all of this knowledge for good. I mean, if our phones are so effective at picking up and spreading microbes, could we somehow use that to our advantage?
That's a fascinating thought. What if we could actually harness the data our phones are already gathering to monitor outbreaks in real time or even track the emergence of new pathogens?
You're saying our phones could become like a global early warning system for infectious diseases.
Precisely. We could potentially identify outbreaks much earlier and take steps to prevent them from spreading. It's a pretty powerful concept, and I think this research highlights just how much potential there is to use our understanding of the microbial world to our advantage.
Well, that is definitely a mind-blowing thought to wrap up on our phones as both potential threats and potential lifesavers. It seems like we've got a lot to think about the next time we reach for our phones. And hey, maybe a quick wipe down wouldn't hurt either. Until next time, stay curious.